If you've had a chance to try out the latest version of AnyRPG, you may have noticed that the character plays different types of footstep sounds depending on the type of terrain that he is walking or running on, and those footstep sounds will smoothly transition from one type to another. In this video, I will demonstrate how to add this type of dynamic footstep sound functionality to your own game. So, let's get started. For this demo, I will be using AnyRPG Engine 0.15, which is available as a free download from any-rpg.org/downloads in Unity package format. At the time of this video creation, the AnyRPG Core 0.15 package is still being reviewed by Unity's curation team, but if you do go to the asset store and you notice that the file version has been updated to 0.15 or higher, then you can also use the Unity Asset Store version to follow along with this demo. For the demo, I will be using the Glowing Forest package by Silver Cats because it has a number of different types of terrain, including wooden bridges, stone pathways, grass, water, mud, and clay. Once you have installed the Glowing Forest package, you may notice a couple of errors in your console. Don't worry about those. Those are just related to the cameras that are already in the scene, and we won't be using those cameras. We'll just be deleting them right away. To create the demo, I will go to Tools, AnyRPG, Wizard, New Game Wizard, and call the new game Footsteps. I'll check the Copy Existing Scene box and then look in my project folder for Scythian Cat Glowing Forest Demo Scene 01 and pull that into the existing scene. I'm going to uncheck all of the default content except for footstep sounds because we'll be using those footstep sounds. I'll then click the Create button and wait for the content to finish installing. If you have an existing game that you would like to add the footstep sounds to, you can go to Tools, AnyRPG, Wizard, and Template Content Wizard. Set scriptable content to 1 here, and simply search for Footstep, and you should find the Footstep Sound Effects template package, and then go ahead and click Install. Once the content has finished installing, you should notice that you are now looking at a scene which has the demo level already configured, and we're ready to begin adding footstep sounds. Before we start, I'm just going to make one small configuration to my game by going to the Games Footsteps Prefab Game Manager folder, clicking on the Footsteps Game Manager, and changing the default player unit profile from UMA player to Mechanim player. This doesn't actually make any difference, but the reason that I'm doing it is because the Mechanim player has boots on by default, and it's going to look kind of funny if our naked Uma character is running around without shoes on and making footstep sounds like he does have shoes on. Just a little bit of aesthetic here. I'm also going to uncheck the Use New Game window checkbox so that we can just jump straight into the game. Next, I'm going to middle click my mouse on the ground where I want my player to start, and then click on the default spawn location prefab and click Ctrl-Alt-F, and now the player will spawn just close to this bridge so we can easily test out lots of different types of terrain. I'm also going to go to group_cameras, and I'm just going to delete that entire group because AnyRPG already includes cameras. Now let's look at the most basic type of footsteps. To do that, I'm going to go to Resources, Footsteps, look for Unit Profile, Player, and find the Mechanim Player Unit Prefab. The most basic type of footsteps that you can use are a footstep loop, so I will demo that first. Let's click on Default Footstep Loop, and uncheck Play on Footstep and set the footstep type to Unit. By setting it to Unit, it means that we will only ever play footsteps that are configured on the character. We won't respond to the environment. By unchecking Play on Footstep, it means that we will expect a sound that is going to automatically loop whenever our character is moving and won't respond to animation events. And by choosing Default Footstep Loop, we have chosen an audio profile which contains a link to an audio clip which has looped audio in it. Let's save the changes that we have made to the scene, then press play and see what that looks like. So as you can hear, no matter what kind of terrain the character is walking around on, he's going to play the same footstep loop, and the cadence of this loop doesn't necessarily match when his feet are hitting the ground. The advantage to this type of footstep configuration is that you don't have to worry about configuring animation events. For all of the rest of the demo, we will be using animation events, so let's take a look at how we can configure those. When the character is jogging, we're using the AnyRPG jog forward animation. To see the animation events, we can go to Window, Animation, Animation. Let's just dock that up here somewhere. And you can see that we've got events here called Play Footstep at frame 9 and frame 31. So if we look at the AnyRPG jog forward animation, you can see that at approximately frame 9, the character's right foot hits the ground, and then at approximately frame 31, the character's left foot hits the ground. These animation events, Play Footstep, will be sent to the character, and when the character receives that, it will play a footstep sound depending on how we have everything configured. So if you're importing an animation that has a running animation or a walking animation and you want to use the Play on Footstep functionality, just make sure to add Play Footstep events to your animation. And to do that, you can just basically click on any frame and then click this Add Event button and then just type in Play Footstep and it should work. If you're using an animation that's contained inside of an FBX file, you can accomplish the same thing by going to the Animation tab of the FBX file and scrolling down to the bottom until you find Events. You can unfold Events and then move to where it looks like the foot is actually hitting the ground, and then just click the Add Event button there, type in Play Footstep and hit apply. Next, we need to configure the character to actually use those footstep events. So I'll go back to my unit profile, click on the Mechanim Player unit. I'm going to set this to unit fallback now. What this means is that it will first try the environment sounds, and if it doesn't find any specific environment sound, then it will just fall back to whatever the default is for the unit. I'm going to check Play on Footstep here, and then make sure to set something that says hits. So I'll set Default Footstep Hits as the character's default footstep sound. Let's take a look at Default Footstep Hits and just see how it's configured. You can see that in this audio profile we have 8 individual footsteps, and if we look at each of these footsteps, you can see that it's just a single footstep hit, not an entire loop. So these will be chosen in order and played through one sound file at a time each time the character's feet hit the ground. Let's go ahead and press play and see if that makes any difference. You can see that the footsteps are now playing exactly when the character's foot hits the ground, but they're still not responding to the terrain yet. So let's go ahead and make the footsteps respond to the terrain. To do that, we will open up the resources folder in our game again, and we will look for the scene node and look at the new scene node, which is the name of the scene that we're in right now. And then we'll find the movement audio section and look for footstep profiles. We can set a default audio for the scene that will play no matter where the character is if nothing else is configured. So in this case, I will just set it to footstep hits leaves, and then we'll be playing leaf sounds no matter where the character is. But to make it even more interesting, we want the footsteps to respond to the terrain that he's on. To do that, we actually want to look at the terrain in the level. So I will click on Terrain. I'm going to click on Paint Terrain, and that will show us, as long as we've got Paint Texture selected here, all of the different terrain layers. So we can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 terrain layers, with numbers 1 and 4 being kind of grassy, 2 and 3 being more like a mud, 5 and 6 being more like a clay, and 7 and 8 being more like a stone. When we configure the footstep sounds in the scene node, every entry corresponds to one of these here in the same order that they show up. So let's go ahead and configure the new scene node. We need 8 footstep profiles. The first one was a grass, so we'll choose footstep hits grass. The fourth one was also grass, so we'll choose footstep hits grass. Now right now I could leave it like this and we could go into the level, and what would happen is whenever the character was over those grass terrain layers, it would play the grass sounds, and for the empty ones it would play leaves sounds, but we can go on and configure the rest of these. For the dirt ones, we don't really have a dirt. The closest thing is probably this gravel fast. So I'm going to click on element 1 here, which is technically the second element because it's 0 indexed, and we'll click on gravel fast. For element 2, we'll also click on gravel fast. For the clay footsteps, I'll do more like a mud sound, so we'll choose footstep hits mud, and both of those two were clay, so footstep hits mud again. And for the last ones, for the stone ones, I'll choose footstep hits cobblestone because that's probably about the closest thing that we've got. And then once again, footstep hits cobblestone. Now that these are all configured, whenever the character is moving over those different types of terrain layers, we'll play the corresponding sound here. So let's go ahead and press play and see how that sounds. Now when we run over stone, we hear stone sounds. When we run over grass, we hear grass sounds. When we run over clay, we're hearing the mud sounds. And when we run over the dirt, we're hearing the gravel sounds. But there is a problem. Let's run over the bridge, and we're still hearing the gravel sounds from the water underneath. And when we run through the water, we are still hearing the gravel sounds from the gravel underneath the water. Next, I'll demonstrate how to use movement sound areas to override sounds in specific areas that are not controlled by terrain. Let's go ahead and find these bridges here. And we can see that we have 2 bridges. I'm just going to click on Open to open up those prefabs. And what I'm going to do is right-click on the bridge, and I'm going to create an empty 3D object, just a cube, underneath the bridge. And then let's set our handle here to the rect tool and expand this a little bit. And what we're going to do is move the rect out so it is basically covering the entire bridge. There. And now we basically have a movement sound area. Let's just move the bottom of this up a little bit so that it only happens when he's actually on the bridge and not running underneath it. The next thing I want to do is go to the box collider and click on Is Trigger. I'm going to set the layer right here down to triggers so that it doesn't interfere with the camera in any way. And I'm going to uncheck the mesh renderer so it's just an invisible area. Next I'm going to click on Add Component and add a movement sound area. I'll look for the movement hit profile name, and I'll open the box up, and in this case I want wood, so I'll just choose Footstep Hits Wood Fast Hard. Now what should happen is whenever our character moves over this bridge and enters this box, then it's going to override whatever the environment footsteps were. Since the terrain directly underneath this box was gravel previously on the bottom of this river, it will override that gravel sound, and now we'll actually get a wood sound when we move over the bridge. Let's save the changes to the bridge, and then let's deal with the water now. If I click down here, you can see that we've got a lot of these different water squares right here. So let's go ahead and open those up and set the override for the water as well. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I am going to create a 3D object cube there. And then I want this to be approximately the same size as the water that it's on. So we'll just adjust the scale a little bit here. I think in this case it was 11.5. Oops, I want the y value to be maybe 3. 11.5. No, it was definitely bigger than that. We'll just sort of drag this out here manually till we get it to about the edge of that water. Yeah, it was 20.8 approximately. Okay, so we'll do the same thing here. We'll set that, I think 20.75 will be good enough. And then what I want to do is move this movement sound area down a little bit. So I will set the position to a y value of -1.5, and with a height of 3, then the top of that cube is matching up exactly with the top of the water. I'm going to set this box collider to Is Trigger, and I'm just going to set the layer here to water. And once again, I will add a movement sound area, and for the movement hits profile, I'm going to choose Footstep Hits Water. Okay, that'll get water footsteps happening. Let's just uncheck the mesh renderer here so that the cube is actually an invisible cube. But there is one more thing that we can do, and we can actually make this water so that we can swim in it as well. So I'm going to type in water here and add a water body. I'll pull in the box collider right here, and for the enter water audio profile, I'll just choose Footstep Hits Water again, and for the swim hits audio profile, I will also just choose Footstep Hits Water because basically that's sort of the only configured audio profile in this project right now that contains splashy sounds. So swim hits is basically the same thing as those movement play footsteps, but the swimming animation actually fires off animation events when the character's hands splash in the water because he's doing a freestyle stroke. Let's save the changes to that water prefab and go ahead and press play and see how it sounds. Now as the character runs over the bridge, you can hear wood footstep sounds. And when he runs through the water, you can hear splashing sounds. And as he swims around in deep water, he actually swims properly. There is one more thing that I just want to demo really quickly, and that is the both setting, and just to show when that might actually make sense. So let's go to Tools, AnyRPG, Welcome window, and we'll go to the Features demo game for this, and press play. When riding the dragon in the Features demo game, you can hear that he is not only making his own thudding footstep sounds, but you can also hear the footstep sounds of the terrain that's underneath him. This makes sense because a creature that big should make more thudding footsteps, but it doesn't make sense to ignore the sounds underneath him completely. That is because the dragon has his footsteps set to both. And what that does is he will be playing the creature footsteps as well as whatever is underneath the terrain, because both will do both the environment and the unit at the same time. That's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you found that useful. If you do, don't forget to thumbs up the video or subscribe to the AnyRPG YouTube channel. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video.